Welcome to Big Blend Radio's Food, Wine, and Travel Show, where we go across country and travel the world with members of the International Food, Wine, Travel Writers Association. Let's go. Welcome, everyone. You know, every second Friday, Nancy and I get excited because we get to chat with travel writers who are going to tell us all about their adventures around the world, across the country. And this is all through the International Food, Wine, Travel Writers Association. And today we have two writers joining us, and they have their blog called Wanderers Compass Travel. And you can go to wandererscompass.com to learn more. We have Joelle Maishi and Ryan Slow joining us, and they have an interesting background on how they first connected and then how they decided to travel together and do it as a blog. And the main focus of today's conversation, though, is castle hunting. Yes, for all of you lovers of castles, this is the episode for you. As a child, I loved castles. I went to every single one, and even in America, we have some castles, believe it or not. They're not as grand as Europe, but we have them. So first, you ladies first, Joelle, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you. Hi, and how are you?
Doing good. So this is interesting because I know you're a journalist, you're a photographer, writer, obviously co-own Wanderers Compass, a travel blog, but you come from the medical background, right? From the nursing side of life.
Yes, I am a retired medical professional. I spent 40 years working in the oncology field, initially with children with cancer and moving later to adult cancer research. So very passionate about that. And then in 2018, retired and was sort of thinking that was going to be it. And then, Ryan had this crazy idea that, we should start a blog because the impact travel had on his life, he felt he wanted to share with others to inspire other veterans like himself to see the world and see how transformational travel can be. And initially I'm like, oh, no way. This is not my thing. I was a medical professional. I wasn't, a blogger. I did do some medical writing. I didn't really do any other writing. So I was like, I don't think we can do it. But next thing you know, I decided to say, okay, let's give it a try as a hobby, thinking, okay, we'll have fun doing this. And it's turned out to be something beyond our imagination. We're so excited at the path it has taken us and continues to take us in these new adventures. And so that's sort of where my background was. And so in a way, we have encompassed the medical aspect of it because we do talk about health aspects of travel, just an article on seasickness and different remedies for people who have issues with that. So we do have a medical component to it. But one of our most exciting parts of the blog is our castle hunting experiences.
Obsession. Can I just elevate that word?
I'd say it's 432 castles later, yes, I would say it's an obsession.
I know, because when we were first talking of you coming on the show, there's like, we could do Easter Island, we can do all these places. And I was just chatting, actually, I did a podcast recording with Joe Clark, who's a travel writer and member of the International Food, Wine, Travel Writers Association. And everyone, we call it IFTWA. And I said, I've got to go to, chat with another couple of IFTWA people. And they went to over 400 castles. She's like, what? Like, I want to hear, she wanted to stay on and be part of it and listen in. I could tell. She's like, I want to do that, But I love that, you bring the medical side, but you also were in research. And as a travel writer, research is part of it, getting your facts right. So I think, and also the comfort part, we all want someone nice and cozy to talk to when we're not feeling well. And so I think that also comes into travel, hospitality. We were just laughing about this on a podcast that just aired on ecotourism and sustainable tourism. And one of the travel writers, Barbara Redding, also IFTWA, she said hospital instead of hotel. And I said, well, you got to think hospitality, the word hospitality. And, going into a hospital, it's like a hotel, but you're getting healed, So,
yep.
They throw magic water on you and you're healed, but no, just kidding. But that hospitality side. So I think you bring a great background. And Ryan, Master Sergeant in the Army Reserves, Ryan, has toured, and really, I think Ryan, the military is a whole other way of travel. You see things in a whole different light. And so welcome to the show, Ryan. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing pretty well. Yeah, so I've been in the Army for 20 years now. I
Wow.
started out active duty originally as an engineer, and I got out, and that's actually how Joelle and I met through Soldiers Angels. I was deployed my second time to Afghanistan, and she started volunteering and writing me or writing soldiers. I was her first one to get a letter and package and stuff. So I wrote her back, and then we eventually started talking through throughout the deployment. And she lives in Washington. I was stationed out there, so when I got back, I asked to meet her, and that's how kind of we started. And
Wow.
their family sort of adopted me for real in a way, and I've been bugging her for 18 years or so now. And so, yeah, I started out active, and I've been in the Army Reserve since as a military police officer,
Cool.
and I'm currently a full-time student, and I quit my job last year in April to go back full-time and just, focus on something and do, a different route in life. I have between the military and I have background in a lot of just security stuff, armed security, police officer. I've been a
So Joelle
bodyguard
feels safe
for a
traveling
short
with you.
time.
She feels safe
Sort
traveling
of.
with you, I think. Yeah,
She,
yeah.
He's very good at watching the room. He's very good at watching the room.
yeah, I have a habit of my 20 years or so of these different fields. I'm always like kind of on guard, but not trying to be paranoid or anything.
Right.
But one of the big things about traveling with me is it actually helps my mild issues that I've had from being in the military, from my mild PTSD and other stuff that I experienced. And
Sure.
being able to go out in public sometimes it gets overwhelming for me, especially at home. But
Mm.
when I'm traveling, it's like an adventure. It's not like, oh, I'm going out and I got to worry about this, I worry that. I mean, we do, because you never know what's going to happen. We're always like, okay, we got to be on time. We got to make sure we have a route and know where we're going, and how does that place drive compared to other places and all those other things. But when I'm out doing that, a lot of that kind of goes away because I'm just in like the story that we're doing. I'm like, oh, look at that, and I'm like, a kid running to a carnival. I'm like, oh, look at that castle, and I'm just
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I don't care who's there. And, I walk into a pub somewhere that's shoulder to shoulder, which I generally do not like back here. But I'm just like, hey, these people are fun, and I just go out because I'm just more just in the moment rather than thinking about everything else, that what if or what could go wrong, because it just gives me a new perspective of the world, that it's not inherently bad or
Yeah.
something always going to happen. But yeah, so that's how we met. And like she said, I was thinking one day, I'm like, why don't we just start like marking all this down? We used to take the first couple of trips we did, and every single castle and really cool structure or something, church, whatever, I would run up in front, or she would be like, oh wait, stop, and I get a picture of me in front of it, which got a little excessive after a while. But we after years of doing this, I was like, well, why don't we start a travel blog? And she's like, well, why would we do that? And we don't know anything of how to do that. And I was just kind of like, well, it's a good way to just, it's like a hobby. We can get our word out there. I mean, we've traveled more than probably everyone I know combined at that point. So I thought, well, it's kind of almost like helping scrapbook. We can go back and be like, oh, hey, look, we remembered this. We have these pictures. It's organized. Because how many times have you gone home and you're like, I'll get to those pictures. I'll organize them. Next thing you know, you just have a hard drive of stuff. where now we can always go back and we can just go on our blog and be like, oh yeah, look at that place we went, or this, and it's like organized for us, kind of. It's like, forcing us to do it, but also gets our word out there and shows how great travel can be if you just open up your eyes and move out of your comfort zone a little bit and just learn. I never thought I was going to travel. I always enjoyed castles when I was young and everything else. And almost 11 years ago now, when she kept saying, well, it'll happen one day, and I finally got myself into a decent enough financial state, being a lot younger then, and she's like, well, let's go on a trip and just, at least you gotta go once, so we did, and that was my first trip, and overseas besides, the military, and it was something I was like, well, I need to fix my life so I can keep doing this, and I did, and ever since then, I've moved up in the world a little bit, a little better job here, another better job, getting promoted in the military, doing all these things, and just growing as a person, in most any way, really, and so here I am, we're
so the word obsession does apply, right? Because I think when you go out,
I'm a connoisseur.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one too. I like that, especially when we talk about castles, right? A connoisseur of castles, right? But I think you're really right, and I find it really interesting about both of you being attracted to castles because of the history that's attached to it. But the travel thing, going through what you've done in the military, and obviously, and thank you for your service. I think, none of us will ever understand unless we were there. But what we can do is try to understand and appreciate and be grateful for that. And, I have so many friends in the military and lived in military towns. And it's when you've gone through a lot of things, like, Nancy and I, my mom and I, I've lived in different countries, and I was raised in Africa. So there's a little PTSD that comes with that. I'm just saying, I was raised a little differently, learning, what an AK-47 is, and a grenade and things like that. It's just a little different, upbringing than most kids in this country. But, when you travel, Ryan, do you feel like you're putting on a different uniform, but it's the uniform you want when you travel? Like, you know what I mean? Like your own uniform, like, hey, I'm going on an adventure that I get to plan with my friend. And it's kind of like your own uniform. It's like you're putting on a different jacket or a different hat, and you have some control until you get there. But because you're preparing, it sounds like both of you have that mindset of preparing for your travel, that you're able to go in from plan A, B to C, D, E, and have those plans in place. Does that happen, Ryan, for you? Am I getting anywhere close on that?
Well, I mean, in a way, yes, because I mean, I'm I'm going out. I've kind of put the thinking hat on, or the explorer hat, I don't know, and try to come up with ideas. I like to do, or we both like to do, a little more off the beaten path. I mean, we'll go, visit Paris, and we'll visit, Amsterdam, or these places that everyone goes. But we generally get a car because we want to see like the authentic countryside and these small towns, and like explore, and not just be like, oh, look, these tourist shops and a million people. We like going to these places where it's like, oh, look. I mean, we've gone so many places, just it's a castle or a walled, fortified town, and we're like the only people there, or maybe 10 other people are there, and like, this is nice. Like, this is just like, it feels like it's ours, but I would say, I mean, in a way, I feel like it's almost like taking off the uniform, because in the Army, as a leader, I help do a lot of the planning, and we do all this stuff and plan ahead and do this, and this has got to happen at this time and do it. And I actually sort of started out that way. Our first two trips, I overwhelmed myself and her with that. I'm like, okay, from 1 o'clock to 1:15. We're gonna stop at this ruin, and we're gonna see this, and then we're gonna
Leave
leave. It's
half
gonna
that
take 10
sandwich.
minutes.
You've got to stay on
Yeah.
time. You're not finishing
Yeah, I
your
was like, then we
sandwich.
got
I
10
don't care how
minutes to
good
drive
it
to
is.
this place with a couple minute deviation, and then that's a pretty big castle. We'll stay there 45 minutes. So that means we leave at this time, and then next thing you know, we're at a castle we thought we were gonna be there for 30 minutes, and it's 2 hours later. I'm like, we gotta go, we're missing stuff. And then I realized that was way too stressful. So I kind of brought it back down and reeled it in after the first 2 trips, and now I said I'm not so much in that mindset. I'm kind of take that uniform off or whatever, and I just kind of go with the flow. We very much do that. Yeah, we just kind of because we've gone to places. One time we went in to we're in Germany, and we were on our way to München, and we had 1 or 2 castles that were not spectacular, but they're little stops I had planned. And then she's like, "Oh, have you ever seen this?" And it was this beautiful medieval walled town that was maybe an hour or so north or more. And I'm like, "Well, that's way out of the way," but I saw it. I'm like, "Oh, let's do that." So I'm like, "Well, you take the time of seeing these 2 castles versus that," and I'm like, "Well, let's do that then." And so we just did that, and we got to our hotel a little later than we wanted to that night. But we do a lot of that because I think not overdoing it, not stressing yourself out. I mean, you could have an itinerary, and that's what we do. I mean, it's not set in stone. I mean, some things are, it's like, okay, well, we're going to see this clearly. We have to see this or this. But I might put 10 things on that day. We might only do 4, or we might do 8 14. Of them, and then we do 14, and then we do 5 other ones. So yeah, I think that the way we do it, we kind of just we take our the planning hats and the other stuff, the uniforms or whatever you want to call it off, really, and I kind of just go with the flow. And I'm like, okay, this would be nice. So how about this? And how about that? And then
because the stories come to you when you have that time. And that's the thing. Sometimes as travel writers, you always when you do media trips, it's like here. It's a fam trip because it's familiarization and it's fast and it's for you to come back and do in depth. But when you travel, I mean, that's why we travel full time, because we just got sick of bouncing up and down, and now we just keep going around and around and around in circles. So it doesn't matter. Yeah. There's always something new and to experience. And so I love what you're saying, because you could go to a castle and find stories that suddenly you're like, oh, wait, I want to see this over here. So you get a bigger picture than the drive-by Instagram shot, right? There's different ways to travel. And Joelle, for you, castles, what was it for you that kind of inspired the castle connoisseuring?
Well, it was interesting because I'm a French by family. My parents were French immigrants. It was my first language, and I remember going to France quite a bit as a child to visit all the family that was still there. And I was always interested in castles, but it wasn't really, I loved it, but it wasn't something I had a passion for. And it was during this first trip 11 years ago in April that when Ryan and I went to Ireland, our first stop, when we left Dublin, we went to the first castle on the list was Trim Castle. And it was very interesting because one thing about traveling with someone who's younger than you, that's the age of your kids, is that their enthusiasm sort of opens up things into yourself that maybe over time you lost. As you get older. And so what I saw in him that day, when he saw Trim Castle, like he sort of said the words before, he lit up like a kid in a candy store. He was the energy in him and his joy and his excitement. And as we took the tour and he looked at the way the building was built and the grounds, he just the smile, his joy, which sometimes with Ryan at that point was a bit of a challenge. And so I was just like, it became contagious to me, because to see that, I started seeing the castles through his eyes versus my life experience. And so that was really fascinating. And it was like, well, let's keep doing this. And as we went through Ireland, we saw a lot of castles. In each castle became its own unique story, its own unique building. And some people say, well, don't they get boring after a while? I mean, 432 Castellators. No, it's
Mm-mm.
fascinating. Even the ones in the same region have
Wow.
a different character. The stones were laid differently. The story within the castle is different, and you can start placing yourself in these places. So it was really through his eyes, looking at that way. I was just like entranced myself, because every time we went, it was excitement again. And there's some castles we'll literally be driving down the road, wherever we are, and we say, "Oh my gosh, look, there's a castle," and we just pull over. The spontaneity we allow ourselves is, let's go see it. Some of them can be literally ruins, or not even have a good label, or not even quote unquote on a map. But we just grabbed it and saw it, because each of them has a fascinating story, and we're just entranced by it. We have a sequence we do every week called Warrior Wednesday that we do on social media, that we discuss warrior destinations from our travels. And I would say about half of them are castle-based, but they're also fortresses and so forth. And as we delve into each of these every week, we've been doing it now for a year and 2 months, is that we really learn, because there is so much story from the architecture of these buildings, the battles that fought there, the tragedies, as well as the successes. I mean, the more we delve into it, the more we get excited about doing this. And our next trip, we haven't actually studied thoroughly. Maybe something Ryan wants to talk to at some point, because I'm still a little confused on how he finds all these castles for us to look at, and he's really good at that. But we're embarking on a trip to Turkey, and we're really excited to see what we can find there. Actually, my husband and I are going there first.
Oh, they're on there. You haven't read thoroughly.
Yeah. We're excited.
I have a list.
So it's just that this incredible passion seen for someone else that got me into it, and now we've taught other people that along the way. As we speak about it, people get excited as well. They're like, "Oh, I hadn't thought of it. I hadn't looked at it that way. I hadn't tried it that way."
Well, castles, don't they actually give you the history of a community, the beginnings of a community? Some, rich king or queen, or some rich person put up a castle, and then it's like, okay, what was going on with wars, and did they put a moat, and how were they able to fight out from the castle outwards? And then you had all the, you had the peasants and the villagers and people like that. And then, like you were saying, like the stonemasons, and, when you think about the architecture is fascinating, but when something like that happens, I always look at that in this country, how once a courthouse goes in, I'm one of those who do courthouses. And I mean, our whole thing is doing parks and public lands. That's why we travel full time.
There are some beautiful buildings when you
courthouses,
you look for them.
Yeah. You see these things and you're like, okay, somebody put it here because stuff was happening. If it's a mining town, suddenly they're like, oh, we need a courthouse because so-and-so keeps going to jail. So now we need to start getting serious. And, a railroad came through or whatever. So it's like the beginnings of what a society started, like a community started, and castles have that. And then here's all the royal opulent stuff, right? And it's different every place you go. And then you get into the dungeons. As a little kid in England, oh my God, the dungeons. And where the execution things where they like guillotine your head off and whatever, the guillotine things. But the dungeons and the jails, to me, I wanted to read I wanted to understand what it was like to not be able to be outside. And as a kid, it was like horrifying because I was a wild kid in the bush, and then this is like entrapment, and it was cold. This was living in England was like a shock after Kenya. This is why we ended up in South Africa. We're like, it's a little cold, but but the castles, their positioning, it's like how they do forts, and forts, it's like a glorified fort, really, isn't it? Don't you think, Ryan?
It is.
In a way.
It is. It's a fortified fort.
I think they're kind of like forts started, and then technology changed, and then became castles, and then the castles kind of became forts again, but stronger, bigger, well defended. But yeah, it's like she said. So one of the last couple trips back, we did Hadrian's Wall, which is, pretty awesome because that, essentially is just almost in a way a giant castle. You have this giant defensive wall, and then periodically you had forts or castles kind of along it, or a town behind it, and we did that whole wall, which was amazing. Then we went up the coastline, the East Coast, went back to Edinburgh, and then we hit up to Stirling Castle. And we were up at Stirling Castle, and we heard these women talking, and the one was talking about her husband, about he's seen a couple castles or whatever, and he had like really no interest being there or seeing whatever. And he said, well, you've seen one castle, you've seen it all. And we both looked at each other like, what? Because I've seen ones that are like, the size of my little backyard or my house, and I've seen ones that are, entire mountaintops. I've seen ones at riverbeds and mountaintops and city in the middle of the cities, on the ocean, on the beach. And each one is so different. Like the way they shaped it, was it built into on the stone, or was it built into the stone, or into the mountain?
Oh,
and
yeah.
each country you go, I mean, there's different materials. You go into let's see, like Denmark and Sweden and Netherlands. They have, they're all like brick, red brick castles, a lot of them, and and they just have this drastic different look compared to you go to England, and this is giant, just thick medieval,
Flint. They use Flint
gray
a lot.
stone. Yeah.
Flint. Until you get to Buckingham Palace. What happened with I'm sorry, but Buckingham Palace, when I was a little kid, we were like, okay, that's going to be the ultimate castle, right? I'm sorry. Am I being a downer about it? But have you guys been to Buckingham Palace?
We didn't go inside, but yes, I've been there a couple of times.
You know what I mean? On the outside,
well,
it
it's
kind of
a
looks
palace.
like
yes.
But it doesn't look like it didn't. As a kid, I remember just like my face falling flat, like thinking this was going to be the palace, the ultimate, exquisite thing. And I remember being highly disappointed. Sorry, England. I love you, England. But like, dudes, come on, man. I don't know if I wanted Cinderella's.
You could do better. You could do better.
Carriage or something. Yeah. I just wanted the carriage there or something, I think. I don't know. But as a little girl, I was kind of like, and you know what castles taught me is, I know a lot of little girls, want to do the princess thing and all that. I think the castle thing got me out of that. I didn't have the princess thing. I don't remember being good at that. And maybe it's because we were there at the punk era was going. Anyway, yeah, it was, I took dolls' heads and gave them punk hairdos and stuff. So yeah, shaved their eyebrows and everything. So you can tell what kind of kid I was, but it was the punk era, right? And so I'm just doing what I see in the street. Like, all right, we're going to take this doll and do that. Too bad. Are we airing this on National Barbie Day? Not. No, I think it's past. But anyway, when you look back at this, it's just really fascinating because you start to realize there's the royalty and the opulence and the la-di-da, but then there's this whole other side that isn't. And you started to, as a little girl, I started to see this isn't that cool, actually, what was going on, depending on where you were, depending on the story. Each place is different, but I started to realize that, you could be born into that, and what are you going to do with it? You can be born into wealth and live in a castle. And I started to look at it completely. And I think Lady Di was, when we got to England, she was getting married to Prince Charles. I think within the first week we were there, that happened. So maybe I was looking at it through her as a princess, thinking it changed my mindset about women in that kind of setting and what they went through. And then what the others, I just had it just was big eye opening kind of a thing to me, because after living in Kenya and seeing, lack of finances, let's put it that way, or, people starving and, there is all that on one side, and then very happy people too. And then going to England, I thought everybody, they have castles, everyone. No, as a little kid going, this is some learning stuff. And I don't know, do you guys pick any of that up when you're going to castles, like seeing the complexities of the stories within a castle of how it goes from
That's
the poorest person to the opulent, most rich, the richest person.
and that's an important part of looking at the history, learning the truth, and especially even how they manage. Some of these castles were incredible building communities and truly were wonderful to their workers and to their farmers. And other ones, it was a horrible situation. And we make an effort before we ever go to any castle. Sometimes we'll literally read as we're driving to that castle, is try to learn the history, because just looking at the building isn't enough. We need to know the story. We need to understand what happened there, and the bad and the good. And there's both. And there's, horrible stories, and there's murders, but there's also good stories and the strength of people's courage for fighting what they believed in, to standing up for, against tyranny or whatever the case would be. All these castles have these unique stories. And again, some of them are boring, and there's just a rich family who built a castle because they want to show off, but it's still a cool building. And there's other ones that have these incredibly dark and painful histories and an enormous amount of loss. But that's the part. If you walk into these castles with open eyes and an open heart, you really you become part of the story. You can hear their voices in the wall. And that really isn't just a cliche.
Yeah.
You really feel that way. Is that you look around and you imagine, you look at the wardrobe that these women had to use, or when you actually have the opportunity to try on their clothes or to feel their clothes, you're thinking, how did they fit into that? Because they were so much smaller. Those corsets. I mean, we're talking about uniforms. Like, I want the army uniform. Thank you. I do not want that. I do not want those whalebone corsets sucking your air, and you might as well. No, they were always fainting, and that's because they couldn't breathe. I mean, come on. It's or they wanted the sniffing salt, or whatever the salts were they would give women back then. Yeah, and it's here, smell this. Maybe they got addicted to that. I don't know what's going on, but we really like the castles. We really like the castles that really take the time to step you back in time, really show you how it was. The whitewashed walls, the furniture. Because it's one thing to see empty rooms, and then you can still imagine things. But it is very fascinating to actually learn how they lived, even just how they went to the bathroom. In some of these castles, just a hole in the side of the wall. And they would just, it would just become, the walls would be covered in this. You
hope they had good aim.
Just because it looked pretty odd at times when you imagined it. It's learning all that life and appreciating then back how far we've come. But then you get to those castles where they actually found ways to bring in plumbing, or, going, wow, these guys, there's some people who are very smart back then, way ahead of their time. And so you see it all. And it's I think when you look into the story, there's enormous to learn from it, and then we can apply it to our lives. We can learn from those things again, and I think that's such an exciting part of history. We're both very aficionados of history. We love looking at all this because we just want to learn about the past. We want to understand. We're just not looking at the pretty building. Yeah.
Well, when you look at the military side of things, just about every castle was built to ward off, right, or to have an advantage wherever they positioned it. And going back to the fort thing, and Ryan, I wanted to ask you about that, because when you think about how castles have been attacked, and it is a game of chess. I always think of chessboards when we look at castles, right? I can't help it. But it is that strategy. So there's a strategy when they build it, and everyone knows they're building it, but it's not like they had Google back then. So it still takes time. But then there are people that go, okay, we're watching the castle and what's going on, and we're going to take that castle down. Boudica, or however you want to say her name, she went after, she did it, So do you look at that, Ryan, about that military, with your history in the military, understanding those strategies and what they did to maybe protect the castle, but then looking at the stories of the opponents basically coming in?
Yeah, I do a lot on that. But just being there and being able to see it and live it is kind of, part of the fun of that. I might, review a little of the story of why they built it or who built it. but then when you get there and you see how high, you're like, oh, this is a great looking castle, and you get there and then you really see how, like, wow, that is way up there, or this how they built it, and then you realize like how thick the walls are and how much engineering and manpower went into this stuff. And then once you start walking through, and then you read the stories, and you really start to grasp how they when you realize these certain battles or whatever that you read, and like, hey, there's these X amount of thousands of people that they warded off, and they only had a quarter of that number in the castle, and you're like, well, how do they do that? And you see it when you're living it, walking through the castle, and you see, like, well, obviously, I mean, look at the position they put themselves in. Look at it's a lot of them were just obviously about efficiency, and others were just more of a deterrence. They probably knew that they would get overtaken at some point, but it was just that's why they had so many and so many locations to kind of like keep the peace in those little sections. But just being able to live it and be there and put those stories you read into place when you're looking out from the walls or wherever and seeing, how did they do this? How did they build it? How could they defend this town or this area? It's pretty fun. And then especially when there's I can't think of the name. I think it's called Kings and Generals. I pops up on my social media from time to time, and they talk about just these different battle strategies and all the time. And so sometimes I see these ancient cities or these castles or whatever, and certain battles that happened and how they fought and won, or how they were taken over, and the strategies. And it's really fun to be able to see like how things were really done. And it's much more than just like, oh, hey, smash that wall, or hey, defend this. There's a lot of strategy to it, and a lot of history, and you start to learn how some of these stories are just seem remarkable. Like, there's no way they did that, but they did.
Yeah. And you got to think what we have now in armor and ammunition versus what they had back then, and how heavy what they were wearing. I mean, when you look at war, right? Back in the day where we like all, drew their swords and shot each other. We're all marching towards each other and just wiping each other out. How things have changed, but storming the castle, that's pretty crazy stuff. I mean, movies are made out of it because it was like, oh yeah, we're going. And it's like the adrenaline for that, that connected and united adrenaline that goes to make that happen, and skill and planning. I mean, that's the truth. Spies are out there. I mean, they had spies in castles for the opponents, working inside. So that. I mean, the servants, there's always a spy in a servant somewhere, right? That was going on. There always was somewhere. So that's what I'm saying. There's so much to castle history that it's mind blowing. But there's also castles, like in this country, someone will build what is a castle, right? Out of a declaration of love to woo a woman a lot of times. There was a castle we came across in Austin, Nevada, on the loneliest highway. It is east of the national park out there that just went out of my head, which is insane. Great Basin National Park. East of that, and it's near Ely, or Eli, however anyone wants to pronounce it. Everyone knows I mess up every name, but it's a little sheep herding town. It's a Basque town. It's a Basque region, and it's a tiny town. And I found this castle, and it's like one turret basically. And that's left now, and it's all caged in. But I was like, there's a castle. And it was like this rich dude like built this castle to get because I think it was when the railroad was coming through, and, mining big time in this area. And he wanted to be able to work there and bring his, family there. And they came out to the desert and said, hell no, we're going home. And so it didn't work. And so it's just like, there's just so many castles in our country that, not these huge opulent ones we're talking about, but there's one in Florida. The guy made it out of coral.
Oh,
I've been to that
Clovercrest,
one.
yeah.
I've been to that one. Yes.
The famous mysteries of that one.
Wasn't that just also a love story? Like, or maybe, I don't know if half of these love
I
stories don't work.
think the
'Cause
guy
if
was
the-
crazy. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like they're building some crazy thing trying to attract their love. It's like, look what I've built you. But if the woman doesn't love you, she doesn't love you kind of thing, even if you built her that. And then sometimes it does work though. There's
It
plantations.
does
There's a
sometimes.
story in Charleston where it did work. But like, yeah, isn't that interesting? Like, I'm going to build
It
this
is.
for you, you know?
Even Obidos, Portugal, that was one of the reason the king, his queen, fell in love with the town, and it was going to be his queen, and he, gave her the town as a wedding gift, with a castle, which she fell in
Wow.
love with, and that became to this day, a very important town in the history of Portugal and the royal families there, and it went on for generations of royalty, that castle in Obidos. So yeah, it's sometimes literally handed to the women, even either their brides to be or their queens, to say, here, this is for you. Again, to keep that loyalty, to give a gift. It's not unusual to hear them literally giving someone a castle, and sometimes taking one just to give to them, by force. So there's all sorts of fascinating stories about that as well. And the many wives, you hear stories that, that wife, well, they didn't like her, so, something happened to her, and now we have the next wife who loved the castle, and there's all sorts of romantic and not so romantic stories surrounding these castles too, which adds to the fascination about learning the history,
Yeah.
because a lot of the castles we go to are medieval castles, so we're talking 600, 700, 800 years old. And these
Crazy.
castles are still, that's the other amazing thing. You mentioned the castle there in Ely that was already crumbling, but we go to these castles that have been built 500, 600, again, 700, 800 years ago, and they're still, for the most part, intact. I mean, it's remarkable, the building, that we can't seem to do that nowadays. But back then, however they built things and whatever they did, many of them have stood the test of time, which is really quite remarkable.
It's like our furniture. It's the same as furniture, right? It's
Yeah.
because we went into mass production. Over there, they had like hands-on. I mean, even our forts, right? The National Park Service battles with us, and state parks too, with keeping like the adobe and everything, and they don't want to. There's like this balance of if you have to leave the structure as is, but not add to the structure, because now you're taking away from the historic roots of the structure, right? So there's this balance of maintaining adobe and missions. I think missions it goes in the same thing as castles to me, missions, because it's
They're
also
incredible, yes.
the beginning of society. It's the beginning of a society being built somewhere, and there's always stories on that, like, my gosh, yes. But they have to kind of let it fall down as it happens, but still try to maintain it without taking away its integrity of the building. But Fort Union in northern New Mexico is still there, and it's amazing what still stands. And it is known as Fort Windy because it is so intensely windy up there. But like, the buildings are still there. They're ruins for sure. But it's like, no way. You guys did something well. There was quality, I think, and hands-on, and people really working together as teams. There's, but at the same time, it was also brutal eras too, where we can say, well, things are a lot nicer. There wasn't as much of rape, pillage, and plunder, but I don't know. You know what I mean? When you look back in history, it was pretty brutal back then. I mean, we have toilets that flush, and even bidets, and unicorn toilets, or whatever you call them. So it's really fascinating when you dig into why was this built, who built it, and I don't think we ever get to know everybody who actually did the work on the castles half of the time.
No, some of them were slave laborers. Other ones were brilliant architects who were so excited to be building things, because when you think, again, they built some of these massive structures without any, without a computer, without graphics, without knowing, again, going to an engineering school where you learn for, 10 years to be an architect. these minds were brilliant, and in a time where the tools just weren't there, they still built these amazingly strong structures that are to this day just magnificent. And that never ceases to amaze us. You think, how did they lift those stones? And we know, I mean, they show us, you know, you learn how. It still is mind-blowing. Especially when you look at today's technology and what they had then, and how these stones, literally, you couldn't put a pin in there. They're so perfectly fit. And you're like, we can't even do that nowadays. Yeah. So it is, from looking at it through even architectural eyes and studying these buildings, there's some buildings out there, I could stare for an hour or two just looking at how the structure was built and their brilliance in the relation to do that. And they were building them, in many times, to be a fortified, obviously, building to keep away the enemy. And they were, the design was amazing. We don't build for that nowadays, you know, in our average buildings. They had to, because of the way things were back then. And it's, again, with the technology they had, and even where they got these stones and how they quarried them, mind-blowing. It's incredible, which makes it so exciting. And that's why we never tire, because each one is so unique in what it took to build it, where they got the materials, who built it, who was the architect, how they came up with the design. And some of these people got architects from other parts of the world and brought them in to say, hey, this one built this in Africa. Well, we're going to bring them up to...
Look at Hearst Castle. Look, that's a castle in America, right? No?
Yep, it is. And it was brought in some great minds who knew about all this stuff. The one castle I've yet to visit. I would really need to go do that. It's one that has just never been to that part of California. And boy, I really want to make that trip.
You know, and a woman
a U.S. castle tour one of these times.
Go ahead, Ryan. Sorry.
I said we have to do a U.S. Tour for castles sometime.
Yeah, you know, now you've got me thinking, because travel writer Sharon Kurtz was just on podcast talking about a castle that is in North Lake Tahoe, and now my brain is like going, "Oh my gosh, I've been to this because you know, it's kind of these collections." But then you start to realize it's part of history, how these things, you know, we've done so many forts. Yeah, it's pretty amazing, because there's an amazing
castle. There's an amazing castle in Napa Valley, which someone actually built, and it's beautiful. I mean, it is, you're in a castle, and they modeled so much from European castles, but he actually brought massive amounts of stone from a castle that was taken down in Europe. So he's actually building it with remnants of old medieval castles, and it's just huge. It's fascinating. The wine isn't so good, but the castle itself, I'm going blank on its name, is absolutely, I've been there 3 times, and I never tire it, because it's just something from the way they heat the place. They've tried to make it so authentic, and he put an enormous amount of money to do this, and just because he loved castles.
I want to go to Transylvania and stay in castles. Apparently you can sleep in them. Like, I know you can actually sleep in castles in England and stuff, but Transylvania would be kind of freaky to me.
Yeah.
we'll get there one day.
You
guys have to do
on our list.
Yeah, you have to do it over Halloween, of course, right? But not necessarily. But but there's ice castles, even, you know, in places. So it just goes to the terrain, and it's true, because the materials are different for each one according to the region. And oh my gosh, now you got me all like it's obsessive. I'm going to be on the obsessive side. Now I'm going to have to start going through all my
culture's got different, you know, designs and ideas.
Yeah, the turrets at the top, some don't have, like, some are square-like, and some are like, you know, swirly whirlies, and you know that I obviously don't have the terms.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big things too. Is they going back to that guy, you know, where they said that you've seen one castle, you've seen it all, and I disagree, because, like, you know, every country is different. Every time period in each country is different, and then they bring their own art. The architecture, their styling, and then some get mixed. You know, especially like in Spain, Spain especially. You got some of the Muslim, Moorish influences, and then you got Christian stuff, and you got all these all these mixes from over the centuries of different people taking it over and back and forth. And but to see these places, and just the think of the manpower and the vision that someone had, and the idea, and just the dedication it takes to build that massive project. Some of these buildings we do now, I'm like, man, that took a long time, and you're like, that must have taken a long time to design and thing, and they built it in 2 years, and you're like, dude, these people built these things over like 10 years by hand, and just the passion and the dedication of that. And that's another thing we love is churches. So we have that, think of how many castles in each town, each castle usually has a church nearby, or
and a graveyard,
towns we go to. So we probably have 4 or 5 times plus more churches. And, we just love because each one's so unique. Some are very simple. Some you go between the different, sections of Christianity and whatever, and just you look at the intricate details and the passion.
And they place them in the right,
and to be able to make it
some
happen.
are pointing to the east, some are pointing this way because of the stained glass and the light, and like missions. There's a mission in that, the light goes down the center, like at solstice. I mean, they sat and looked at what was going on celestially. And when you guys were talking, so there's many ruins in Native American culture, and they don't build them like castles, right? So you've got to think, like, if you go to Bandelier National Monument outside Santa Fe, they lived within the caves, and they had little windows and everything. The Pueblo people, like the Pueblo, to me, Pueblos are almost like our Native American castles, if you will, but, not with the big king and queen kind of deal, kind of like you could have your elders, right? But just a little bit more democratic, let's put it that way, if you think about an English side to that, right? But, Chaco Canyon, have either of you been to Chaco Canyon in northern New Mexico? Chaco is these celestial ruins, and they built these. When you're talking about how this precision is, they are perfect circles, and we're talking ancient indigenous history, ancient, and they lived up in the Aztec area, which is north of that, just past near Shiprock and all of that, right? And so there's a river there, the Adams River, but Chaco itself, this was a ceremonial site that went through the solstices, from what we all believe at this time. And these structures, what is left are these ruins, but they're like circles, perfect circles with rock, all done like they did their own bricks. It's insane. And then they have a Pueblo style, some Pueblo buildings. But these other sites, they were all for everyone to gather during the solstices, and the perfect circle. And we all race off to Egypt and everything to look at the pyramids and everything. But we have this in our backyard. I think we should all race everywhere, get out there. It's like the Mayan temples are the same
We're trying to focus on that a little bit here in the next year or two.
Yeah, the Mayan side.
Get to the U.S. and other more local stuff and really see what there is, because there's more stuff, like I said, I didn't know there was any castles, and now I look and I'm like, there's quite a few dozen castles, especially, New York and Michigan and around that area. I mean, there's a lot of stuff.
There's a lot of wineries who built their winery in castle form, like you were saying, Joel. So that means you have to drink wine and look at castles. So sad. So sad.
Yeah, I know. It's rough. It's a rough assignment.
No.
Someone's got to do
I
it.
love that yeah, he's in. He's like, let's go. You got to do what you're supposed to do.
Bear that burden for everyone.
I'll help you all. But I love that you're both members of IFTWA, the International Food Wine Travel Writers Association. They have a conference coming up in Lafayette, Louisiana, and we're talking about like Zydeco brunch. That's going to be fun. There's swamps, there's gators. Yes. It is the friendliest city in America. It's the happiest, excuse me. And it's a beautiful part of the country. And Joel, I think you're going, right? This is happening in October, everyone. So you're planning on going to the conference?
I've already bought my ticket, so I am definitely going. I'm a big fan of Louisiana.
She's an early bird.
I visited New Orleans. Oh yeah, I got it. I bought it last year. I already planned that out, and I've loved Louisiana. I've been there probably 10 times, so I'm actually looking forward to going back. It's been a few years. but I'm a big fan of that part of the country. I just love the people, the culture, the stories, and having a French heritage. I also like that as well. So that will be something. We've got several trips planned between now and then, but I am definitely looking forward to that October trip. And I'm really hoping Ryan can find a way to get there, but we'll know soon if he can go or not. But it will be awesome. It would be awesome because I think he's never been to Louisiana, so I think he would also love that part of the country. There's so much, again, history and heritage, and the people are fascinating, and the food is so unique. So, yeah, I'm super excited about the meeting in Lafayette. Actually, you mentioned Sharon Kurtz. We actually just met her in New York City. We had dinner with her during the IFTWA dinner. So a lot of these names that are very well known to IFTWA, we met actually several of these people during our dinner in New York City. So it seems like a really cool, energetic group that has a lot to offer. So yeah, we feel very honored that we're part of their network.
Yeah. Well, you both, thank you so much for joining us on today's podcast. Everyone, to learn more about the International Food Wine Travel Writers Association, go to ifwtwa.org, and their conference is open to members and non-members. But if you're going to go to the conference, you might as well become a member. I think it's like more cost effective too. I'm just saying. So everyone, you want to keep up with Ryan and Joelle, go to wandererscompass.com and follow them on social media. Keep up with them on castle hunting. And I know you want to hear from people that also go to castles, right? You're into that?
Absolutely. If that's any suggestions, anyone who says, hey, we went to this castle, it's amazing, because it's unbelievable how many there are. And sometimes we just can't find them all. But if someone's like, hey, you're going to here, we love this one, please share with us, because we would love to get ideas of where to go.
Awesome. Well, when you go to Nevada, call me.
I will.
Send you to the one. I'm going to have to find it. It's not even a turret. It's like, I'll have to find that for you and send it to you. I did a story on it a little bit, and then I got all like, wow, he did all this and for his family, and then the family's like, nah. And he's like, dude, come on, man. He built this whole thing, there's like where he got the stones and how they actually carried it, and they used this lumber from here and brought it across the rivers to this. And then the family's like, nah, we're going somewhere else. It's like, wow. Oh my gosh. I don't think I wouldn't have gotten away with that kind of attitude. It'd be like, you will go. You will go to that summer house. Who gave you that option?
You will appreciate it.
You will like it, you will love it, and you will write about it. But thank you both. It has been a joy having you on the show, and happy travels, and stay safe, and happy castle hunting.
Thank you, Lisa. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio's Food, Wine, and Travel Show, featuring members of the International Food, Wine, Travel Writers Association. We encourage you to visit their website. We say IFTWA, which is ifwtwa.org. You can also follow us at bigblendradio.com. Happy travels, everyone.